The assembly hall of the Galactic Commonwealth Central Station bustled with activity as representatives from a dozen species moved about with purpose. Holographic displays shimmered above various gathering points, showing star charts, biological data, and the latest military training statistics. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Korlak, his four upper limbs gesturing emphatically as he addressed a gathering of military officials. The integration exercises must proceed according to protocol. Korlak's voice carried the distinct harmonic undertones of the Cthar species. His exoskeleton gleamed under the station's lights, each of his 6 eyes focused on a different part of his audience. Every species contributes according to their strengths and biological capabilities. This is the foundation of our Commonwealth. The Cthar were renowned throughout the galaxy for their incredible multitasking abilities. Their 6-limbed bodies and partitioned brain structure allowed them to simultaneously perform complex tasks that would overwhelm most other species. Their military operations were marvels of coordination and efficiency. Across the room, Commander Zex Lee of the Xylos watched the proceedings with the characteristic stillness of her kind. The photosensitive patches on her translucent skin flickered with subtle patterns, a private conversation with other Xylos present. The Xylos were the undisputed masters of speed within the Commonwealth. Their neural pathways utilized light-based transmission rather than electrochemical signals, allowing them reactions so fast they sometimes appeared to move before threats even materialized. Among these impressive figures, Lieutenant Marcus Thorne stood somewhat apart, his human frame seemingly ordinary by comparison. Humanity was a relatively recent addition to the Galactic Commonwealth, admitted less than 2 decades ago. While humans have been welcomed for their adaptability and unique problem-solving approaches, they were widely regarded as physically inferior to many Commonwealth species, particularly in matters of reaction time and coordination. Lieutenant Thorne, Ambassador Korlak's voice pulled Marcus from his thoughts. Will you be prepared for tomorrow's evaluation exercises? Yes, Ambassador. Marcus replied with the practiced neutrality that had become second nature in Commonwealth interactions. The human contingent is ready. Good, Korlak responded, though the subtle vibration in his mandibles suggested skepticism. Perhaps this time the data will suggest more suitable positions for human integration into our defense frameworks. Marcus offered a regulatory bow, but said nothing. He had heard the whispers, seen the data charts. Humans were categorized as slow responders in the Commonwealth metrics, their nervous systems carrying signals at barely 100 meters per second, while species like the Xylos operated nearly at the speed of light. The standard biological assessments had placed humans in the lower middle tier of reaction capabilities. "Don't let him get to you," came a quiet voice beside him. Dr. Alara Vance, the leading human xenobiologist attached to the Commonwealth Science Division, had approached without his notice. Her dark eyes flashed with familiar frustration. Korlak only respects what he can measure, and he's measuring the wrong things. "It doesn't matter," Marcus replied. "Tomorrow's just another evaluation. I'll fly my runs, they'll collect their data, and everything stays the same." Dr. Vance smiled thinly. "Maybe not. I've been pushing for changes to the simulation parameters, something that might showcase different aspects of human performance under pressure." "You're fighting an uphill battle, Dr. Vance," Marcus said. "The Commonwealth has been categorizing species by the same metrics for centuries. We're slow. That's just biology." "Is it?" Vance's expression turned thoughtful. "Then how do you explain your performance in the SETI sector exercises? Or Specialist Rivera during the asteroid field navigation trials? The data doesn't add up, and I intend to find out why." Before Marcus could respond, an announcement echoed through the hall, calling all evaluation participants to a final briefing. As he turned to leave, Vance caught his arm. "Just fly like you always do tomorrow, Lieutenant. Don't try to be a Xylos or a Cthar. Be human." Marcus nodded and headed toward the briefing room, passing clusters of Commonwealth species, many of whom regarded him with the subtle body language that he had learned to recognize as mild condescension. The human contingent was tolerated, respected for certain cognitive abilities, but never truly feared or admired in the way that mattered most in a military alliance. Tomorrow, he thought, would be no different from any other evaluation day. He was wrong. The evaluation chamber was a massive spherical room lined with projection technology so advanced it could create simulations indistinguishable from reality. At the center hovered a dozen flight pods, self-contained units that responded to pilot input while remaining stationary in physical space. Each pod was connected to the central simulation system, allowing pilots to experience identical scenarios while their performances were meticulously measured. Marcus settled into the human-modified pod, allowing the neural interface to connect as he had done hundreds of times before. Across the chamber, he could see pilots from 7 other species preparing similarly. The lightning-quick Xylos, the multitasking Thar, the hive-minded Vespari, and others. Initial calibration sequence beginning. Announced the system AI. Standard reaction assessment in 3, 2, 1. The first test was elementary, a simple reaction time measurement. A signal would appear, and pilots would respond as quickly as possible. Marcus performed as expected, his results appearing on the shared display for all to see. 267 milliseconds average reaction time. Respectable for a human, but nearly 3 times slower than the Xylos pilot's 89 milliseconds, and well below the Cthar 142 milliseconds. From the observation deck, Marcus could almost feel Ambassador Korlak's satisfaction. The data was confirming the established hierarchy. Proceeding to complex evasion assessment, the AI continued. Randomized threat simulation initiating. The pod's interior transformed around Marcus, becoming the cockpit of a Commonwealth interceptor. Around him stretched the vast darkness of space, punctuated by distant stars and the looming shape of an asteroid field ahead. Your objective is to navigate through the asteroid field while responding to unpredictable threats, the AI explained. Performance will be measured on successful evasion, not speed of transit. As the simulation began in earnest, Marcus felt himself sliding into the familiar state he experienced during high-pressure situations. The first few minutes proceeded as expected, his performance solid but unremarkable compared to the other species. He navigated carefully between floating rocks while evading occasional simulated enemy fire. Then the difficulty increased dramatically. Multiple threats began appearing simultaneously. Asteroids tumbling in unpredictable patterns, enemy ships emerging from hidden positions, space mines activating with barely any warning. The cockpit alerts blared constantly as the scenario pushed the limits of what should be physically possible to evade. Marcus felt something change in his awareness. Time didn't slow down. That was a popular but inaccurate description. Instead, patterns began emerging in his perception. The subtle rotation of an asteroid suggesting its future path. The barely perceptible energy signature spike before an enemy weapon fired. The relationship between objects in his field of vision revealing safe corridors that would exist seconds before they actually formed. His hands moved the controls not in reaction to what was happening, but in anticipation of what was about to happen. He banked the ship hard left, avoiding a missile that had not yet been fired. He accelerated through a gap between asteroids that had appeared impossibly narrow, but widened precisely as he passed through. He cut power at exactly the right moment to drift silently past an enemy sensor array that hadn't yet activated. In the observation deck, confusion erupted. There must be a malfunction in the simulation, Korlak insisted, his appendages working furiously over the control interfaces. The human pod is receiving threat data before it's being generated. No malfunction detected. The system AI responded. All pilots are receiving identical simulation feeds. Then how is he avoiding threats before their trajectories are even finalized? Demanded a Xylos observer, her skin flashing patterns of confusion and disbelief. Unknown, the AI replied. Lieutenant Thorne's evasion initiates an average of 204 milliseconds before threat patterns are fully established. This exceeds theoretical reaction capability by approximately 471 milliseconds when accounting for human neural transmission speeds. Dr. Vance studied the data streams with growing excitement. He's not reacting faster, she said quietly, almost to herself. He's predicting. When the simulation finally ended, Marcus emerged from his pod to find the evaluation chamber in chaos. Technical specialists were examining his pod for signs of tampering. Military officials from various species were reviewing the encounter data with expressions ranging from suspicion to awe. Ambassador Korlak stood at the center, his exoskeleton rigid with tension. "Explain yourself, Lieutenant," Korlak demanded as Marcus approached. "Explain what, Ambassador?" "I completed the evaluation as instructed. You achieve an evasion success rate of 97.8% against a scenario designed to be impossible to fully evade," Korlak said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. The system recorded evasive actions, initiating before threats were fully manifested. Marcus shrugged slightly. "I just followed the flow." "The flow," repeated Korlak flatly. "That's enough," Dr. Vance interjected, stepping between them. "Ambassador, I request a full scientific review of today's results. I believe we've discovered something significant about human performance under pressure." Korlak's multifaceted eyes studied her for a long moment before he responded. "Granted. Assemble your team, Dr. Vance. I want answers, not mysteries." Over the next week, a scientific commission comprising experts from 12 species conducted intensive investigations. Lieutenant Thorne and 20 other human volunteers were subjected to a battery of tests, their neural activities monitored through increasingly sophisticated methods as they responded to various high-pressure scenarios. In the Commission's primary laboratory, Dr. Vance stood before a wall of neural imaging displays, explaining her findings to a skeptical audience. "The data is consistent across all human subjects," she said, highlighting a particular brain activity pattern that appeared repeatedly in the scans. Under acute stress conditions, these regions of the human brain show extraordinary activity. The insular cortex, anterior cingulate, and particularly these patterns in the right temporoparietal junction. A Vespari neurophysiologist buzzed forward, her wing cases vibrating with skepticism. "These patterns do not correspond to faster signal transmission. Human nerve conduction velocity remains unchanged." "Exactly," Vance nodded emphatically. "Because we're not seeing faster reactions in the traditional sense. We're seeing predictive processing." She gestured to a new set of scans. When placed under sufficient pressure, the human brain devotes enormous resources to pattern recognition and probability mapping. It creates a predictive model of immediate future events based on subtle environmental cues that aren't being consciously processed. "Speculation," dismissed a Kthar scientist. "The simpler explanation is equipment malfunction or data misinterpretation." "Then explain this," Vance challenged, bringing up video of a human pilot successfully evading simulated threats in complete darkness, with only minimal environmental data available. "Or this," she continued, showing another human accurately anticipating and countering attack patterns they had never encountered before. "We call it subconscious predictive response," Vance explained. SPR. It's not faster reflexes. It's the ability to act based on a prediction of what's about to happen before it fully occurs. "That's impossible," argued a Xylo's representative. "No known neurological mechanism could enable such capability." "For your species, perhaps," Vance countered. "But humans evolved in an environment filled with ambush predators and unpredictable natural threats. Our ancestors didn't survive by being the fastest. They survived by anticipating danger moments before it struck." She displayed a simplified evolutionary timeline. While many Commonwealth species evolved toward maximizing processing speed or sensory capabilities, humans developed this predictive processing as an alternative survival strategy. "Even if this SPR exists," Ambassador Korlak interjected from the back of the room, "it appears unreliable. Not all humans demonstrate it to the same degree. And from your own data, it functions inconsistently even in the same individual." "It's most effective under genuine pressure," Vance acknowledged. when adrenaline flows, when consequences feel real. That's why it often doesn't appear in standard evaluations. They don't trigger the necessary physiological state. The debate raged for days. Some commission members embraced Vance's findings, while others remained deeply skeptical. Eventually, a divided report was submitted to the Commonwealth High Council, the majority acknowledging the existence of this unusual human capability, while a significant minority insisted on alternative explanations. What couldn't be denied was the performance data itself. When placed in high-stakes scenarios where patterns could be subconsciously identified, some humans consistently performed in ways that defied their supposed biological limitations. The findings, despite attempts to keep them confidential, leaked throughout the Commonwealth. Reactions varied dramatically between species and political factions. In a secure conference room aboard the Commonwealth's military headquarters station, General Razix of the Strategic Planning Division addressed his stunned colleagues. "We need to reassess every tactical simulation involving human forces." The Xylo's officer's skin pulsed with urgent light patterns. "If these findings are correct, our current models are fundamentally flawed." "Let's not overreact," counseled Icthar, strategist, his name Glyph identifying him as a close associate of Ambassador Korlak. "One unexplained performance anomaly doesn't invalidate centuries of tactical doctrine." 17 anomalies now, corrected another officer, sliding a data packet into the central projector. "Since the initial incident, we've identified 16 previous cases where human performances exceeded theoretical limits in crisis situations. We dismissed them as statistical outliers or recording errors." The projection showed footage from various Commonwealth operations over the previous decade. A human security team navigating through a supposedly impenetrable Cthar defense grid by seemingly anticipating the microsecond-long gaps in sensor coverage. A human diplomat responding to negotiation points before they were fully articulated. A human pilot successfully evading an ambush by altering course seconds before the attackers revealed themselves. "Most troubling," continued General Razix, "is the implication for our containment strategies." A heavy silence fell over the room. While never officially acknowledged, most senior Commonwealth officials were aware that contingency plans existed for containing or neutralizing any member species that might pose a threat to the Alliance. The human contingency plan had been considered one of the simplest, relying on overwhelming speed advantage in any potential conflict. "If they can anticipate our movements," began one officer. "Precisely," Razix confirmed. "Our speed advantage may be partially neutralized in any scenario complex enough to trigger this SPR capability." "We're overestimating the threat," the Cthar strategist insisted. "Even with this peculiar ability, humans remain physically slower and militarily inferior to the primary Commonwealth forces." "Perhaps," Razix acknowledged, "but we must update our assessments nonetheless. The humans are not what we thought they were." As military strategists reconsidered their positions, the wider implications began rippling through Commonwealth society. Human representatives found themselves approached with greater caution in diplomatic settings. Security protocols around human visitors were subtly enhanced. Training programs began incorporating unpredictable pattern variations specifically designed to confuse potential human prediction. For Lieutenant Marcus Thorne, the aftermath of his evaluation performance brought unwelcome attention. He found himself repeatedly called before various scientific and military committees, asked to demonstrate this ability that he had never consciously identified as unusual. Some officials treated him with newfound respect, others with thinly veiled suspicion. "How does it feel?" asked a Vespari scientist during one such session. "When you predict a threat?" Marcus struggled to articulate something that had always been intuitive. "It doesn't feel like prediction. It feels like recognizing something that's already happening, like seeing the first raindrops and knowing a storm is coming." "But the storm hasn't started yet," the scientist pressed. "Hasn't it?" Marcus countered. "The pressure changes, clouds form, wind patterns shift. The storm exists before the downpour. You just have to know what to look for." In Dr. Vance's laboratory, research continued at an intense pace. She had assembled a team of human scientists along with open-minded colleagues from other species to better understand the neurological basis of SPR. The breakthrough came when we stopped looking for faster reactions and started looking for predictive patterns, she explained to a visiting delegation from the Science Council. Human brains are constantly running simulations of the immediate future, thousands of times per second. Under normal circumstances, these simulations remain in the background of consciousness. But under acute stress, they can temporarily take precedence. A fascinating adaptation, commented a Tellurian counselor, her crystalline form refracting light as she examined the neural models. Though I question its reliability in complex scenarios. That's actually where it excels, Vance countered. The more complex and pattern-rich the environment, the more data points for the predictive process to work with. Simple, completely random events are harder to predict than complex systems with underlying patterns. As the research progressed and debate continued, the galaxy moved forward in its chaotic way. Political tensions simmered in the outer systems. Resources were contested. Ancient rivalries flickered beneath the veneer of Commonwealth cooperation. And then disaster struck without warning. The Nexus Station, a vital Commonwealth hub connecting three major spiral arms of the galaxy, sent out a frantic distress call before communications abruptly terminated. Initial reports suggested a catastrophic containment failure in the station's exotic matter power core, a failure that could potentially create a subspace rupture threatening nearby systems. The nearest Commonwealth response vessel was the UCS Dauntless, a mid-sized patrol cruiser with a mixed-species crew, including a small human contingent. Lieutenant Marcus Thorne, recently reassigned as a tactical specialist, was among them. Approaching Nexus Station, announced the Xylos pilot, her appendages moving with characteristic speed across the controls. Radiation levels exceeding safe parameters. Subspace distortions detected. On the main view screen, Nexus Station was barely recognizable. Its elegant spiral structure was now partially collapsed, with ominous energy discharges erupting from its central hub. Around the station, smaller vessels attempted emergency evacuations, their movements becoming increasingly erratic as the subspace distortions intensified. Analysis indicates complete core collapse within 47 minutes, reported the Cathar science officer. Evacuation efforts compromised by increasing spatial instability. Projected casualty rate, 62 to 78% of station personnel and civilians. Can we stabilize the core? Demanded Captain Vree, the Tellurian commander of the Dauntless. Negative. Core containment systems are completely offline. Attempting remote access would be futile. Manual intervention? The captain pressed. Theoretically possible, the science officer replied, but navigation to the core control center is now impossible due to structural damage and radiation levels. The automated systems are following emergency protocols, but they're failing to adapt to the cascading nature of this particular breach. Marcus found himself studying the holographic model of the station's deteriorating condition. Something about the pattern of energy discharges caught his attention. They weren't random. There was a rhythm to them, a predictable sequence emerging from the chaos. Captain, he interrupted, stepping forward. I believe there's a way to reach the core control center. All eyes turned to him as he continued. The subspace distortions are following a pattern. There are corridors of stability between the energy discharges that could allow a small craft to approach. Impossible, dismissed the science officer. The distortions are chaotic by definition. They appear chaotic, Marcus corrected, but there's an underlying pattern. Look at the harmonic relationships between these energy spikes. They're creating momentary stable points like standing waves. He manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the patterns only he seemed to perceive. A shuttle could navigate these corridors with the right timing. I can plot the course. Even if such corridors exist, Captain Vree said skeptically, they would close and reform too quickly for any pilot to navigate, even a Xylos. I can do it, Marcus stated simply. A tense silence filled the bridge. The captain studied him for a long moment before turning to her executive officer. This is the human with the documented SPR capability? Yes, Captain. Lieutenant Thorne's predictive abilities are extensively recorded. Captain Vria's crystalline form flickered with internal light as she considered the options. Finally, she nodded. Prepare a shuttle. Lieutenant Thorne will attempt to reach the core control center. She fixed him with a penetrating gaze. You understand this is likely a one-way mission? I understand, Captain. As Marcus headed toward the shuttle bay, he was surprised to find Dr. Vance waiting for him. She had been attached to the Dauntless as a scientific liaison following their research breakthroughs. I heard what you're attempting, she said without preamble. The patterns you're seeing, are you certain they're real? As certain as I can be, Marcus replied, checking the environmental suit he would need to withstand the radiation. They make sense to me. Your brain will be operating at the absolute limits of predictive capability, Vance warned. No human has attempted to navigate something this complex and chaotic before. First time for everything, Doctor. Vance hesitated, then handed him a small device. Neural stabilizer. It might help maintain your predictive state under extreme stress. Experimental, but it's something. Marcus accepted it with a nod of thanks. Minutes later, he was aboard the shuttle, launching into the maelstrom surrounding Nexus Station. From the Dauntless, the bridge crew watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as the tiny shuttle appeared to fly directly toward certain destruction. Energy discharges lashed out in seemingly random patterns. Subspace distortions warped the very fabric of reality, and deadly radiation permeated everything. Yet somehow, the shuttle survived. It weaved an impossible path through the chaos, sometimes appearing to change course moments before a new energy discharge erupted precisely where it would have been. The trajectory made no logical sense when viewed. As a whole, a series of apparently random zigs and zags that nonetheless carried the craft steadily closer to the station's core. Impossible, whispered the Xylo's pilot, her photoreceptors flickering rapidly. No one can navigate that. He's not navigating what's there, Dr. Vance explained, her eyes fixed on the display. He's navigating what's about to be there. Inside the shuttle, Marcus existed in a state of hyper-focused awareness. The neural stabilizer hummed against his temple, helping maintain the delicate balance of his predictive state. The universe around him seemed to exist in multiple overlapping states. What was, what is, and what would be blending into a complex pattern that only his brain could interpret. He didn't fly where the safe corridors were. He flew where they would be at the exact moment he arrived. His hands moved the controls in a dance of anticipation, sometimes changing course to avoid dangers that hadn't yet manifested. Approaching core access, he reported, his voice strained with concentration. Docking in 30 seconds. What followed was a desperate race against time. Marcus navigated the partially collapsed corridors of the station, sometimes changing direction before structural collapses occurred, arriving at the core control center with minutes to spare before catastrophic failure. The automated systems had been attempting to follow standard containment protocols, but the unique nature of this cascade failure required a different approach. With guidance from the Dauntless science team, Marcus implemented a counterintuitive solution, temporarily amplifying the instability in one section to create a cancellation effect in another, like fighting fire with fire. As the core stabilized, he had to face the reality that his return path was now completely cut off. The shuttle had been damaged beyond repair during the approach, and the station's transportation systems were offline. Core stabilized, he reported to the Dauntless. Station preservation protocols engaging. I've programmed the systems to maintain this configuration. Understood, Lieutenant. Captain Vri responded, her normally modulated voice carrying an unusual emotional undertone. Rescue operations are commencing for the remaining station personnel. Your actions have saved thousands of lives. Left unspoken was the fact that his own life would likely be forfeit. The radiation exposure alone would be fatal within hours, even without considering the lack of escape route. Marcus settled into a surprisingly calm acceptance as he monitored the stabilization process. He had always known this capability that made him special might someday demand an equivalent price. But the Commonwealth had not survived for millennia by abandoning its heroes. As Marcus watched the final stabilization sequences complete, an alert sounded from a nearby console. A message from the Dauntless. Maintain position. Extraction team inbound via experimental phase shift technology. Risky but possible. Your predictive ability needed for synchronization. Hours later, against all statistical probability, Marcus Thorne found himself in the medical bay of the Dauntless. The extraction had succeeded through a combination of experimental technology and his ability to anticipate the moments of phase shift alignment. He would survive, though not without consequences. The radiation exposure and neural strain had taken a toll that would require months of recovery. News of the Nexus Station incident spread rapidly throughout the Commonwealth. The dramatic rescue, captured by the Dauntless sensor arrays, became the most convincing demonstration yet of human predictive capabilities. What might have remained a controversial scientific theory became accepted fact, impossible to deny when witnessed so dramatically. 2 months later, Ambassador Korlak stood before the Commonwealth High Council, presenting the findings of a comprehensive strategic review. In light of recent events and conclusive evidence, the Strategic Directorate formally recommends reclassification of human capabilities within Commonwealth assessment frameworks. His voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. Specifically, we recognize that traditional metrics of reaction speed fail to capture the unique predictive processing that humans exhibit under pressure. The recommendation was approved with little debate. Across Commonwealth databases, the designation for humans shifted from slow-response biologicals to a new category: predictive response specialists. Training programs were revised, tactical doctrines updated, and integration protocols reimagined to better leverage this newly understood capability. For the human contingent, the change brought both opportunity and scrutiny. Their roles expanded beyond previous limitations, particularly in crisis response, pattern analysis, and complex system management. Human officers found themselves specifically requested for missions involving chaotic environments or unpredictable opponents. Yet they also encountered a new wariness from some quarters. Their ability to see what wasn't yet there unsettled many species accustomed to more straightforward advantages. In the recovery gardens of Commonwealth Central Station, Dr. Alara Vance found Ambassador Korlak contemplating the artificial waterfall that formed the garden centerpiece. His exoskeleton had dulled slightly with age since their first encounters, but his posture remained rigidly formal. "Dr. Vance," he acknowledged as she approached, "your research continues to reshape our understanding." Science is always reshaping understanding, Ambassador. That's its purpose. Korlak's mandibles clicked in what she had learned to recognize as a far expression of wry amusement. Indeed, though rarely with such profound strategic implications. He gestured toward the waterfall. "For centuries, my people have prided ourselves on perceiving the individual droplets where others see only the flow. We thought this made us superior observers. And now I understand that humans see neither the droplets nor the flow, but the pattern that connects them across time." His multifaceted eyes turned toward her. A humbling realization for a culture that values precision measurement. "Different evolutionary paths, different advantages," Vance suggested. "The Commonwealth is stronger for its diversity." A diplomatic response, Korlak observed. "Though I note you refrained from mentioning the military simulations showing human forces now achieving unexpected victory percentages against previously superior opponents." Vance smiled slightly. "As you say, Ambassador, profound strategic implications." They stood in silence for a moment before Korlak spoke again. "I have lived long enough to see many certainties challenged, Dr. Vance, but few as fundamental as this. We thought we understood the hierarchy of capabilities among sentient species. We were wrong. The universe delights in surprising us," Vance replied. "I suspect this won't be the last time we discover that measuring the wrong things led us to the wrong conclusions." "No," Korlak agreed. his tone carrying unexpected warmth. "I rather hope it won't." As they parted ways, Dr. Vance reflected on how dramatically humanity's position had changed. From dismissed newcomers to respected, if somewhat feared, equals. All because they had finally been measured correctly, not by the speed of their reactions, but by their unique ability to anticipate what hadn't yet occurred. The human embassy on Commonwealth Central now displayed a new motto, inscribed in multiple languages beneath the Earth seal: "To truly see, look ahead."